It actually, okay, now we're recording. Okay, we're here for an endorsement interview with Dan Ryan, who's a candidate for city council position 2, the runoff in on August 11th to replace the late city commissioner Nick Fish. That race has 2 candidates in it, Dan Ryan and Loretta Smith. Former County Commissioner Smith has elected not to join us today, so we'll move forward with you, Dan. To just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, what you did for a living, that kind of thing.
Sure. Thank you, Willamette Week, for participating in this summer election. It's catching everybody by surprise. I can't tell you how many political insiders have actually told me I'm not right, that it's in November. And so it's been fascinating. Anyway, I'm Dan Ryan. I'm running for city council. I was born and raised in Portland. I graduated from Roosevelt High School, and I was the first in my family then to go off to college and finish. And being the youngest of 8, that's a little different. So a quick explanation. I was born into a family with lots of love and also mental health and substance abuse challenges. So the 5 of the siblings, myself included, who are alive and well, have some sort of recovery in our life, so we can continue to show up and be and have a good life. So I'm grateful for all of them. And I went away to New York and then Seattle, started building my career. And then in 1995, I had a doctor look me in the eye after 2 bouts of pneumocystis pneumonia, and being in the hospital for much of that spring, they let me know that I needed to make plans. And at that time, 6 months to a year was the prognosis with somebody with HIV. So I came home to Portland. My sister, who I'm close with, I figured would be the only person who could handle me as a patient. So that's one of the main reasons I came home. And then that same doctor, about 3 months later, the drugs came out, so science caught up with me. And the good news is I started to see, I started to improve. And that same doctor told me, hey, you need to go back to work. You're not going to die after all. So the last 25 years, I've been able to serve my city, my hometown. I started at the School of Fine and Performing Arts at Portland State. I was promoted to be the director of development for the first capital campaign for the university, $200 million. And after that, I went on to work at the ballet. I was the revenue person there, trying to keep dancers on stage during the Great Recession. At that same time, I ran and was elected to the Portland Public School Board, where I was proud of the fact that we started looking at racial equity with some real data, really getting honest about the fact that we've been failing many of our communities of color forever, but we finally were being honest about it with real proof, if you will. And also, I would like to acknowledge that after a bout of 4-3 votes, they were about reconfiguring schools around the school district. I was on the 3 side of that. And after 4 months of that, my colleagues, if you will, I was the one person they could agree upon to be the chair. So I think that says a little bit about me, that I can stay focused on principles and to stay focused on policy, and I don't really take it that personally. It's time to move on and work together. So after 3 years, I was in a very quick interview process with the Portland Schools Foundation, and I said yes to becoming their CEO. It was decided that it was good for me to go deeper into the impact I could have as a leader for the K-12 system. But I also made it really clear to the board that we needed to go beyond PPS, that we have all these school districts in Portland we never talk about, and they actually have more students of color, more poverty, and definitely more new arrivals. And so it was agreed upon that we would become a real organization that would look at systemic change for the entire districts of the city of Portland. I was proud of that. In my time there, the 3 things I would highlight is that we've been talking about the high school graduation crisis for a long, long time with no results. I believe it's because we do a lot of work in echo chambers where one sector keeps talking amongst themselves. And it was really important to include others, whether it was pre-K, whether it was higher ed, and really important to have the trades at the table, and also important to have business. It's too often you only go to business when you're trying to pass a bond levy, and it was time for them to be involved more throughout the year and looking at practices. So the good news is, with the community accountability, looking at metrics, making sure we kept everything transparent, talking about new practices that were working, we saw double-digit increases in graduation rates throughout the county. And we saw a 4% increase, acceleration for African American Latinx students. And I was really proud of that. We also started looking at disproportionate discipline, the pipeline to prison, as it's called. And with that, it's predominantly white female teachers who have a mental model where they send the boys to the principal's office at a much higher rate, and then African American and Latinx boys at a much higher rate as well. And so we had to get honest about that, look at the metrics again. Why is that happening? There's always this denial phase when you first have people look at data when it doesn't please them. And so I was actually the facilitator at 3 of the majority minority middle schools at Reynolds, Centennial, and George and PPS. And what I noticed is the patterns were all the same. And so one of my favorite things that we did at All Hands Raised is we brought them together, those peers from the county, to actually learn from one another. Too often in education, we fly people to some destination and 3 people go and they, spend a lot of money and I guess get excited, but there's no impact after they return. So it's more important to build that type of systemic change through relationships and through that type of change. The third one that I was really proud of that I want to mention is that the mental model for post-secondary was always college, maybe military, or good luck. And we have this vast opportunity in the trades and apprenticeship programs. And we had people on our board that had some great conflict with the higher ed people. And I say that with a smile, because I do believe that creative tension and conflict is really important in meetings. And that's one thing that we did at All Hands Raised. Our meetings were never that comfortable. And in Portland Nice, I do believe that's something we always have to challenge. People too often, I think, have photo op meetings and proclamations, and then they bitch about each other in the parking lot. So it's really important, I think, to have that type of honesty in government. And then, quite frankly, we had to go around government to get these results because it just wasn't working. So it was a community solution with all of this, and it was shared credit, shared responsibility. And so we saw a lot of movement. I let go of that job after it'd be almost 11 years. I always said if you're a good fit, you do something for maybe 7 to 11 years, and then you get out of the way and let the community continue to own it. I didn't want to be the founder syndrome person. And so I have no idea what I was going to do. And anyway, after the end of my little personal sabbatical, people knocked on my door, a lot of former staff, a lot of board members, and recruited me for this adventure I've been on, this really long job interview that started at the end of January. And I'm delighted to be continuing to be in this job interview. I think many of the crises that we were looking at pre-COVID, pre-uprising are still there. I think they're even more magnified. Homelessness and housing and the complexity of that. We've been trying to get some results with this for over a decade, and I think that we haven't seen anything that we can be proud of. It's embarrassing, actually, and it's personal for me. My brother, my 3rd oldest brother, who had intense mental health issues, stopped taking his meds, stopped going to his therapist, if you will, and it didn't take long for him to spiral out. And he ended up on the streets, and he was unhousable for our family. But we couldn't find any real wraparound services that were also available, so it was frustrating. I also think we talk about a home for everyone in a too simple way. I think there's at least 3 dimensions. There's people like my brother. There's our essential workers, which we're now celebrating finally, who haven't been able to afford to live in Portland for some time, many of them. What's the long-term strategy to house such wonderful people in our community? And then there's always those people on the brink of being thrown out because they live paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of my friends in the creative arts industry, whether they're musicians or run little restaurants, are actually in that place right now. And what's the strategy for affordable housing for such people? So and the sad thing is we pass things and you don't know what the results are. There's no transparency. And when you compare us to other municipalities, we're always 2 to 3 years behind on going from voters approving to actually breaking ground and providing a unit. Everyone that runs for office talks about the fact that our customer service, if you will, at the city that's supposed to work of $5.6 billion hasn't been working for some time. I've been really clear that I hope that we can bust it up sooner than later. And that means the 5 mini-mayor form of government. It's an archaic system that every other city of our size has got rid of over a century ago. So I'd like us to at least catch up into the last century and have a new system. I come into this job with more executive experience with most. I think I'll do a really good job of hiring professionals to oversee bureaus. but 95% of my time will not to be in the micro issues. I want to be focused on the top priorities of the day. And in addition to homelessness and housing, you know, there are definitely police reform that was there before. I hope soon enough the cameras will stop running and we'll have some opportunity to build on what these reforms look like. I think Commissioner Hardesty's on the right track with the repurposing of 15 million. I didn't understand any plan for the 50 million, so I said no to that. But I do believe that this community safety system has to be, of course, reimagined, and it has to be culture change work. And I think the police bureau and the police union contract negotiations are going to be really important. I know they are. I know that this ballot measure that we have in the fall will help lay the ground for that. But it's really, you need an independent person from the outside that can come in and be free to make those, to have those negotiations and not be worried about what their next race is. You know, I'm 58. I have no desire to keep moving up the chain in the political career. I probably would have got involved a lot earlier. I would say those are the top two. And the third that I think is really resonating with me right now because of my friends in the private sector, especially small businesses, is I think there's some real denial about just how severe this economic devastation is. The public sector always is lagging behind the private sector and experiencing revenue loss. That's just how the system's set up, especially with the way we receive revenue. And when you look at the models right now, it's like the Great Depression is meeting the Spanish flu of 1919. And I know none of us were alive then, but it's like this is quite a double whammy and it's severe. So I do think that we need to think out of the box and really focus on taking care of one another, shared sacrifice. We got to shelter people and we got to feed people. And that's where my heart's at the moment, is that real grave concern. And, you know, it's 25 years later and I feel great. Just had a recent doctor's visit. And he was kind of floored by the fact that my blood work was better than it's been in 15 years. So, you know, I'm ready to serve my city and I'm delighted to be here in front of you and hopefully giving a chance for voters to get to know me better.
Great, thank you. So it's a little bit difficult because your opponent is not with us on this call, but could you tell us in essence why you would be a better choice than Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I would basically say it like this. If you look at my track record of getting results, of my creativity, my innovation, my taking an organization that was deeply in debt and turning it around and making it relevant, hiring, supervising, mentoring hundreds and hundreds of people in my career. I've been in management of some sort for 35 years. I've also been as a school board member, as a member of boards. I've been a community advocate and activist. I have a fresh perspective. I think that good government is out in the community and you bubble it up from there. And I'm not weighted down by the status quo. And I think that she had her shot for 8 years in the county government. And you can look at that track record and why would you promote somebody? So I think I'm the person that's interviewing for this job that deserves a promotion. And I think Portlanders are ready for an outsider that hasn't been stuck inside the government for so many years.
So, Dan, if I may.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. So, Dan, you've pointed out to a number of stylistic differences between you and Commissioner Smith. Are there any specific policy issues in which you two disagree?
I can't keep track of, anyway, I'm really clear about where I'm standing and where I'm evolving on issues. I think one example where for some reason we're differing now is on Bybee Lakes Treatment Center, formerly called Wapato. For me, I think now knowing a little bit more about my personal story and knowing that I come from the revenue side of generating investments to help nonprofits thrive, I'm not tone deaf to community solutions. And so when the community raises millions of dollars, has hired someone that was formerly homeless and addicted and basically a profile like my brother Tim to be a leader of a repurposed building that we paid for, you know, post-COVID, we'll make sure it's COVID compliant. Why would I say no to that being part of the system? It looks like she changed her mind on that. I think being free from all of the special interest endorsements and pressures, I'm free to be a community independent advocate for the people of this city. And I think that that actually.
Which special interests? Which special interests are you talking about?
Well, I do believe that I have not raked in any of the union and labor endorsements, if you will.
Dan, I want to ask you about a specific issue in your background. In 2013, I believe, a former employee at All Hands Raised filed a lawsuit, and in that lawsuit accused you of discriminating against her. I believe she's black, and she alleged that you discriminated against her on the basis of race. Can you tell us what you can about that lawsuit, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll just say that again, I've interviewed and hired and successfully trained and mentored hundreds and hundreds of employees in my life. And this is the one incident that I have of such. And I'll just say that, you know, we've settled quickly out of court. I have no ill will towards that person. I was clear that, you know, on our end, we needed to improve our hiring process in terms of skills tests and such. So it was really clear within a couple of weeks that this person wasn't going to be able to succeed in their job. And we did our best to provide a very helpful off-ramp. And anyway, I want to respect them, and I have no ill will. And so we settled quickly because we had to focus on the mission. When you only have 15 employees, you can't be bogged down with a long-waited court case. So I learned why people settle out of court. It's so I just want to say that I've moved on, and I know that she has too.
Okay. Have you been downtown or I know you live in North Portland, I believe. Have you been part of any of the protests over the past 55, 60 nights?
Yeah, I was hesitant because of my pre-existing conditions, if you will. So I'm very COVID compliant. I did go down. I went down on Friday night. I think for me, I was so upset by the fascism from the federal government, and I really try. I literally focus every day not to mention that person's name and just try not to think about their existence. However, I was angry that the federal government actually got involved in such a gross way and using Portland to stage a political campaign. A pattern of our president is to focus on what's good for them, not for the country. And so I was just very, very upset. And so I've been upset at the beginning because of the fact that police literally been getting by with murder. And even though we passed policies, if the contract is set up in the way that it is, and if the legalities aren't supported above us at the state, they've always been able to get by with murder and end up winning lawsuits. So it's just such a frustrating situation. I think that we have to figure out how to come together and go forward. It was really hard to hear Friday night, some of the language that was being yelled at someone like Commissioner Hardesty, who's been a champion for justice and police reforms for decades. So I think for me, as a person that's really comfortable having conflict in the room, this is something I thought about on my walk this morning, my run walk, is how can we bring together the different fractions of the protesters, the police, the people that are harmed downtown, that both live there and work there, people that are harmed in my own neighborhood. I don't live far from North Denver and Lombard. People that live near Killingsworth and MLK and work there. I know it sounds like a big meeting. You'd have to have maybe two, and then really not have it at City Hall, have it at some location in the community, have two people representing each group, make sure everyone is unarmed, if you will, which includes cell phones, no cell phones. And, it really comes from my heart from that. I was always a fan of Jimmy Carter, right? Sorry for the people that are much younger than me on this call, but he did a really good job, I thought, in the Middle East of being patient and steadfast. And I always marveled at international conflicts and just how barbaric and intense they looked. Well, now they're happening in my hometown. And we have to prioritize communities of color at this table. It won't be business as usual. It won't just be the same people that would come to such a table. It would be the young African-American leaders I've seen that have been speaking so eloquently when the protests are inspiring and peaceful. And yet we also have to let in a couple of those people that I didn't understand why they were so angry, or so vile on the other night at Commissioner Hardesty. But it's just, we have to figure this out. We have to have our own Middle East peace accord in the city, because back to my earlier point, this economic devastation is intense. We're going to be in a situation we have to figure out how to take care of each other. How are we going to do that when we're in an environment like this? So I think we're at a fork in the road in humanity, and I think Portland has to rise above and figure out how we can take care of each other and move our city forward. And I think that I have the temperament and the life experience to be an inspired healing agent, and I'm optimistic, obviously, to bring people together to really have some tough dialogue right now, because this has got to stop. And the foreign interference of our federal government, they don't need to be at the table. They need to just leave. And it will help if they see that we're actually empowering ourselves to do something.
That's great. Thank you. Again, although your opponent's not here, I understand that on the campaign trail, she's been critical of votes you took as a school board member that she has said show that you're not supportive of teachers, that you voted against increasing their compensation. So I'm probably doing a poor job of representing her criticism of you, but you've heard this criticism. Can you please speak to it?
Well, I've heard back channels criticism, not too much directly to my face. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, first of all, I have tons of teachers who are supportive of my candidacy. They were some of the people that reached out to recruit me. They always liked that I always included them in system change work and in practice change work. The incident that she's talking about, as a school board member, we had a vote on their contract. For 3 years, we were supposed to see some movement on the teacher transfer issue. Bear with me as I try not to be too wonky. The fact is, we were 2 months behind all of the neighboring districts on hiring transfer teachers. And that became a #1 factor on why we were unable to hire young teachers, especially teachers of color. So since there was no movement or action on that, and I knew that we had 4 votes to pass the contract, I did an racial equity vote in 2005 to push back on that inaction. And I said, it's not okay in 3 years' time that this hasn't moved. And so I'm voting no because of that. So that was my stance.
Do you think that's a factor in your not getting any of the labor endorsements in this race?
You have to ask the labor unions. What I'm learning as a new person running for this higher profile office is there's a lot of loyalty to the status quo and to people that have been established. Outsiders are always risky for labor unions, and so I'm definitely an outsider. So that's all I can think of. I participated in every interview that I was invited to, and I could tell I connected well with the members. But I know there's a hierarchy above the members that help decide these things. So be it. I've always done well with people on the ground. Sometimes I'm a status quo buster and a reformer. So sometimes people in power are irritated, I guess, with people like me.
Can you tell us about a mistake that you've made in your professional life and your career? What was the mistake and what did you learn from it?
Oh, geez. Well, I celebrate my mistakes, first of all, because that's the only way you keep learning and growing in life. So I want to pick one when I was elected official, and I mentioned it in the primary, and that was where I felt pressure from the room, if you will, on it was a little Skyline Elementary School. They wanted to have their own K-8, and they're kind of like the Alaska of the school district. They're so far out there. So, but my point is, it felt out of sync and out of the system that I was supporting. And so I remember I got home and I didn't sleep well that night because I felt like I responded more to the emotions of the room as opposed to my principles. So what I learned when you're in the school board or anything in life is I have to be aligned with my own principles and my beliefs, my attitudes and values, and not be reacting to the emotions of the room. And I think at a really heightened emotional time, that's going to be really important for someone coming in to office. because leadership isn't always popular in the moment with the emotions of the people that show up. And I also know that there's a lot of people that don't have time to come to lobby that are also part of the system. So I would say that would be one that I regret. Yeah, and I never did it after that. It was my first 6 months. That was the good part. Yeah, Mark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Dan, I wanted to ask you, on your campaign's website, you talk about the importance of affordable housing, and you focus on the issue. Well, here, let me read. Building units that cost $400,000 isn't going to get us out of this crisis. So, this touches on an issue that has been sensitive. We raise all this money, and yet it costs, for some reason, when the city builds houses, it seems to cost a lot more. So I'm just curious, you pointed that out as a problem. I'm not sure what it is you're going to do about that.
Well, I think, Mark, the fact that I had the courage to point it out as a problem is a starting point. I think that one reason government doesn't improve for the people is because we keep secrets and we don't let out just basic facts such as that. And so for me, transparency is action, and transparency can lead to new solutions. I think with the housing crisis and lack of concrete action, if you will, no pun intended, that we have not seen is due to the fact that there is a lack of transparency. There's also a lack of innovation on who's at the table. It seems those meetings seem to be the elected officials, those who they have power over, and which includes those who are receiving the contract, and not enough people from the community that are affected by housing, not enough businesses that are affected by the fact that they are not having as many customers pre-COVID because people didn't feel safe to go downtown to go to their restaurants or come to their arts organizations. I've talked to many people over 60, especially females that love downtown and loved going to the arts, but they just haven't felt safe lately. Where's that voice? My point is, if you look at my system change work at All Hands Raised, it's a lot about the composite of who's sitting at the table. And if you have the same echo chambers of the table kissing the same rings, you're not going to see much progress. If you don't have a meeting that has more creative tension in it, you're not going to see any change. And when you don't have clear metrics about where you're going and you're not having accountability about those metrics, then you're going to keep people basically in the dark on where you're going. So
Dan,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want you to try to get a little bit more specific. We understand the problem. The problem is the city has raised all kinds of money. And what you're saying is, yeah, but they're not building enough houses and they're not doing it fast enough. And, you've talked about the lack of transparency, fine, and not having enough people at the table. I'm still not exactly sure how that leads us to building more houses for the same amount of money. But let's start with this question. Who's currently responsible for the lack of transparency and the lack of not having the right people at the table? Is it the mayor? Who are you pointing the finger at?
I'm saying that the people in charge, and that would be both at the city and the county, could definitely improve the composite of who is at the table. That's what I'm saying.
So are you saying that the mayor of Portland is not focused enough on building more houses at a modest price?
For over a decade, everyone that's run for office has heard the complaints that going from receiving the money, if you will, from the voters to working through the bureau process to try to get a permit so they could actually break ground and build something has been an issue for over a decade or more, and you know that. And if we continue to keep, one reason you want to change the form of government is to try to break down those silos and get some efficiency. When you can go to Gresham, when you can go to Beaverton, when you go to all of the surrounding municipalities and build affordable housing for less money and less time, that's what you're seeing over and over again. So why don't we look at the best practices of those municipalities that are near us? My job isn't to give you every single micro plan. My job is to be a leader that is smart enough to bring the right people to the table, smart enough to know that we're calling out a problem. Innovators look at complex problems and are humble enough to admit that they're a mess and are able to get creative and provide solutions. So I know when I get in there, I'll have a lot more insight to figure out how to do that.
But Dan, I'm sorry, I'm going to just come at this one more time. The fact that we currently have a weak mayor form of government, you're in support of a strong mayor form of government. So we have a strong mayor of government, a strong mayor form of government. How does that all of a sudden lead to more houses being built for less money?
Because you might.
What is Ted Wheeler unable to do right now?
The form of government we have is. Someone would please answer that. Turn it off. Thank you. It's distracting to everyone watching this. All right, appreciate it. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that when you bust up the current 5 mini-mayor system of government, that's a really good idea for a lot of different reasons. I want to be a member of a team that focuses on the top issues that are facing this city, like homelessness and housing. I think having a strong mayor and a city council that's not overseeing bureaus and getting lost in the weeds of a bureau micro issue is never a good thing. We should be focused on the top issues. So I'd be freed up, no matter what current bureau assignment I had, to be able to focus on the top issues, which include housing. So I feel like it'd put more pressure on the mayor to do the right thing because I'd have more time to focus on those top issues.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Nope. Okay. Mark?
Well, Dan, obviously, the issue of race is more present now in Portland and in politics than it has been in years. You're running against a black woman who has been in politics for quite some time. All else being equal, why shouldn't this be a moment in time when we elect a black woman to city council?
Yeah, I am very aware of everything you just said. I am very, very proud of my of the humility and the uncomfortable challenge of a white privileged person unpacking it. It's called white guilt. I'm well aware I live in a city that has an epidemic of white guilt. And it's because we have a lot of people in this city that haven't had a lot of relationships, haven't broke bread, haven't had a multicultural existence. And so there's this tendency to wrap themselves around the sign or the woke language and not enough around doing the very difficult, painful work of admitting that we're all complicit and we all have work to do. So I think it's helped that I have nephews and nieces that are, I know what it's like when I'm out in public with my indigenous and black and Filipino nephews and nieces, and how people look at me differently than when I'm with my blue-eyed nephews and nieces. I'm well aware of, a former husband who's black and how that was something that helped wake me up. And boy, did I get to unpack my white guilt during that relationship. So I'm very comfortable with my work, and I'll always continue to do that work. I think that what matters most to Portlanders is that we need someone with the leadership skills, the creativity, the community connections, the innovation at a time where we have multiple crises, and also somebody that comes from the community that's actually gotten results for communities of color. I'm very proud of that. My whole focus on the school board and at All Hands Raised was racial equity. And so I've always been a bridge builder in that arena. My opponent knows that I have deep relationships within the African-American community. I have many people of color supporting me and endorsing me. I, again, come from North Portland. I've lived in Harlem, not because it was gentrified then, it's because I was so poor that I was an actor and where else I found somewhere to live. So, and I think finally I'm free of special interest. And so I will be able to be free to just be a community representative on the city council.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I am a queer, and I do have HIV, and I've been beat up and gay bashed, it's called. I know what it's like when I didn't feel safe to go to the police. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but I have experiences of being hated by many people, including people of color, because I'm a queer. I know what it's like to be there for my gender fluid, Latinx, fiance who doesn't often feel safe in the world. So I know who I am, and I know I'm going to represent marginalized communities because I always have.
Tess, Letitia, do you have questions for Dan?
I don't think I have any right now.
Me neither.
Okay, I think we're done here. Dan, thanks for your time.
I do a lot of these Zoom hours, you guys are usually a little more like lively, but I realize this is different. So, yeah.
Monday morning.
We don't have any
Monday
cocktails
morning.
at the moment. Traditionally we try to ask a fun question at this point in the process. And I don't think we came up with a fun question this time, so I'm going to ask a question that I find fun. Have you been to the protests in the last 6 weeks? And if so, what did you chant?
I was at the protest on Friday night. Although they handed out words and lyrics to This Little Light of Mine, I knew that song well. So I knew the lyrics. I just, that's the one I remember the most because the wax on I didn't have one of those covers on my candle. So the wax just like dripped all over my hand during that portion of the evening. But the one that was repeated the most, which needed to be at this time, especially on Friday night, as we stand in front of a justice center, was no justice and then no peace.
You've received, this actually leads to another question for me. You've received Commissioner Hardesty's endorsement in this race, correct?
Correct.
There is long-standing bad blood between Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Smith. Do you think that played a role in the endorsement you received, or is it for other reasons?
Yeah, I've also received endorsements from Sushila Jayapal. I've received endorsements from Tina Kotek. I receive endorsements, as an outsider, I receive endorsements from people I have relationships with. And with Joanne, it's because we knew one another from doing community work. And what she liked about my primary run, although she did, endorse one of my opponents in the primary, is that she liked that I wasn't a traditional insider. And she knows to do the system change work, the reform work. In City Hall, it really helps when you have an outsider. So, our dialogue has been very, very helpful. We cover a lot of ground. We have, we know different constituencies. And I think the critical mass of Commissioner-elect Rubio, myself, and Joanne, and Commissioner Hardesty gives Portlanders, for the first time in a long time, a really fresh composite of fresh community outsiders that really can shake City Hall up and reform it so we can be the city we're supposed to be.
Should the mayor give the police bureau to Joanne Hardesty?
That's a great conversation for you to have with the mayor and with Commissioner Hardesty. I'm going to stay out.
All right.
Yeah.
I think those are my protest-related questions of the moment.
Well, thank you.
I am curious, I guess. This is not a protest question, but purely a politics one. Do you have an endorsement in the November mayoral runoff?
No, I'm fully engaged in this race that's on August 11th. I'm trying to get as many people to wake up as possible that we have a vote coming up. And so I haven't had a chance to think about any other race. I'm really, it's just not on my radar.
Got it.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
No,
Thanks
thank
for
you,
the
Dan.
questions. It's nice.